Carol has asked me to bring the message, and I just want you to remember about what is it you're not supposed to do to the messenger. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, today's a day in which there are all sorts of technology, right? And sometimes on the screens up here, you'll notice when they're going from one phase to the other, they'll see a little sign that says, searching for signals, right? Seen that sign up there? Well, we're kind of like that way, right? That computer up there is saying, give me a signal to tell me what to do. He's searching for signals, okay? If you give it the right signal, it will give you the information you want, okay? Well, we aren't computers, although quite frankly, some people think we are, and some people seem like they're computers, but we're not. We're humans, but we're also searching for signals or signs, right, about what we should do. The computer needs that spark of electricity to give them direction, and in that way, we do the same thing with our lives. Maybe not electricity, but the jolt we get sometimes is almost like electricity. We may not have that electric jolt, but we need that signal to nudge us whichever way we need to go. Actually, we are bombarded with signals, with signs, all the time, all kinds that you can get. The question arises, what should we do once we receive that signal? Should we pay attention to it or should we not? How do we know if that signal is a signal? Boy, those are questions that I don't have real answers for. But we might look at a few things to see how important signals are. Some of you are probably football fans, right? And so think what a football team would be like if nobody got the signal from the quarterback. Now, the teams I like seem to go through that phase pretty often. And you kind of wonder what they're doing out there. Are they talking to the quarterback or not? But the signals are there. They just don't get it. Okay. Oh, on a more seasonal note, you all were out and about today. You saw lots of signs. Leaves are turning. They're falling down. It's a sign of a change of seasons, right? And that's one we can see and enjoy. At least I hope we enjoy it at that point. Okay. Other signs, well, if we see a married couple with a woman who is 8 months pregnant, I think that's a sign that there are going to be some big changes in their life, right? Especially if it's the first one. Can you remember that first one to come along? I can. Oh my goodness, I had no clue about the change in life, right? It was a great change, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world, but let me tell you, it's one of those signs you don't know what's going to happen until the thing happens at that particular point. Okay. As parents, we remember that. Well, those of you who are students in school, do you have a clue? How about a grade? You get an A and somebody says you're doing well, and you get a grade that's not an A, and people are sometimes saying, maybe I need to study a little harder, C, whatever. So grades are doing the same thing. Heck, we continue with signals. Traffic signals are all around, right? You stop at the four-way stop, at least I hope you do. I can remember one time this past year somebody didn't, but four-way stops. With traffic signals we follow, they're pretty important. If we miss a signal there, we are in trouble, right? Actually, I had that happen to me once. I mean, I've missed more than one traffic signal. I was in the Air Force way back when, and I was in a new area, and I didn't know the roads very well. So I was driving along on this strange road. We went up and over a hill, okay? At the top of that hill was a stop sign that guess who missed? Guess who didn't see the signal or the sign that was right there? Me. When I got over to the top of that signal, I went down and went right straight across a 4-lane interstate highway. I made it, and I don't know how. Can you believe it or not, at that time of day, which was about 10 o'clock in the morning, there were no cars on the road, either side of me. I missed a signal, but maybe I was getting another one. I don't know, but they come that way. And even on a more mundane thing, perhaps, traffic, turn signals on the car. Every car has a turn signal, right? And people always use them, right? So you know when they're going to be turned. Sometimes this is a time you don't pay attention to a signal because the guy is signaling, I'm going to turn, and then they go straight, right? So some signals we don't pay attention to. Okay. There are more important signals in life, though, than the ones I've just mentioned. Important signals from God, okay? But they're not always so clear, and not everybody gets them quite the same way. Not everybody sees the same stop sign, to say the least, at that point, okay? But with like all signals, whether from mundane, everyday, or from God, we have a choice. We can follow, or we can forget it. Either way, we have a choice. We can acknowledge them, follow their lead, we can ignore them. Okay. But as I said, sometimes it's not easy to recognize what God wants us to do. Not like a stoplight, it's not as apparent that we have here. Now, God's signals have been around for a long time, and those of you that have read the Bible, which I know you have, there are lots of Bible stories in which God has given a signal, right? So let's go all the way back to good old Moses. We all know Moses, right? Now, Moses was really not much different than we were. He's been standing around, living his life and so on. And in Exodus chapter 3, verse 2 through 6, we get a good example of what a signal is like and how you should respond. God told Moses that he should go to Egypt. Well, out of the blue, as far as Moses was concerned, I'm supposed to go to Egypt. Now, a lot of times God gives us a signal, and we always think, do I really want to follow that? Or I'm not so sure I want to. But God's voice, I would think, would be a pretty good signal, right? But did Moses say, oh, yes, I'm going, see you around? Not at all. What he did was to say, what if, or who am I? In other words, why are you choosing me? God's probably a little exasperated and saying, okay, this guy needs more signals. Excuse me. So he tried to come up with some excuse, Moses did, and he said, well, what if these people don't believe me? So don't send me, they might not believe me. God said, okay, here's a signal. He took the staff from Moses, threw it on the ground, and it turned into a snake. And then boy, that would have scared me. And then he put the snake, made it back into a staff, right? Okay. Good enough. Nope. Then God said, put out your hand. Leprosy appeared on Moses' hand. And then God healed it, right? The next thing he did was they poured water on the sand and it turned into blood. By this point, I'm sure God is saying, how many signs do you need? And Moses finally said, I understand. I think I'm going off. So he did pay attention finally to that particular aspect of it. Okay. It changed his life. He paid attention to a signal, and it changed his life. Now, a little later, a fellow named John the Baptist came along, and he too received a sign. As a matter of fact, the second major window back here, if you look at it, there happens to be a thing which I haven't gotten to in the children's sermon yet, but that'd be the next one. There's a sign, right? And in this particular case, Matthew writes, at the moment of Jesus' baptism, quote, he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and landing on him. That's what that sign in the window is showing us. That was a sign, a signal for John the Baptist. He took it, and he knew exactly what it stood for. Now, signs aren't always just necessarily directly words from God, okay? They come in a lot of different forms. Okay? If you remember, there was a fellow by the name of Saul, S-A-U-L, not the king, but another guy, okay? Saul is one of these guys who's going to be involved in signs of a different form. I think it stands as one of the great examples of how a signal or a sign from God can change your life. Okay? Saul, as you know, had been a strong persecutor of Christians. Okay? Oh, he was strong in his faith, but it wasn't Christian, and he was out there to get those people whenever he possibly could, which he did, as a matter of fact. Okay? One day, though, Saul started off on a road trip to the city of Damascus, and on the way, he had a life-changing experience and a signal and a sign from God. All right? What happened was there was a flashing, blinding light, and Saul was blinded. Okay? There's some words in here that if you want to read the story fuller, you can check that out. But basically what we know is Paul was blinded, couldn't see anything, so they eventually led him to a town nearby where a Christian, a follower of Christ, put his hands over Saul's eyes, and after a bit, the scales fell away, and he could see again. And from that life-changing moment, Paul became a strong, strong advocate of Christianity, and as you know, he went out to become one of the greatest figures in the life of Christianity that we have. Okay? So there are different things. It was a brand new life from Paul, from a persecutor to advocate. Okay? Can't get much greater than that at that point. Now, others people feel about the signs somewhat the same way we do. You can't always tell what they are, and they don't always come in the voice of God. 400 years after Paul, who, by the way, his name was changed, that was pretty impressive, too, when you get right down to it. 400 years after that, we have a fellow by the name of Augustine, who was living in North Africa. His first name was Saint, as we all know, And Augustine started off a pretty bad life, wild and woolly, having a great time, going to parties, dating every woman he could find practically. He said he was a Christian, but he really wasn't. As a matter of fact, in his writings, he say, no, I wasn't. You know, I kind of did, but I didn't. I thought I could do a lot of good things and then God would like me. And that was the point that he was trying to make. But one day, he had moved to Italy, for example, where he was going to teach rhetoric. And he was standing in the garden. In the garden, he heard a voice, and not saying the voice of God. Matter of fact, it was kind of a children's rhyme saying, pick me up and read, pick me up and read. And Augustine thought, that's pretty strange. What kind of a thing is that? But he grabbed the Bible, picked it up, opened it randomly, just in the middle, put his finger down, and there was a verse that changed his life. That was the sign from God. Okay? He was reading in Romans chapter 13, verses 11 through 15. And after he read it, he said, he felt a light of relief from all anxiety flooded my life, my heart, and all shades of doubt dispelled. It was a life-changing moment. He said, grace of God is the most important thing. And that's what he planned to show from that point on. Now, kind of an interesting thing is, especially in the 1800s in the United States, it was really common for people to imitate good old St. Augustine. Open up the Bible, put your finger at a verse and say, this is what God is telling me to do. That could be an interesting thing if you did that. But it was kind of a common thing among a lot of people at that point. Okay. So the verses were there, and that changed his life. Another fellow who was changed and signals a little bit different was a guy named Martin Luther. Okay. Now Luther, is the fellow who gets credit for, not completely, but he does get a lot of credit for the Protestant Reformation. Okay. Luther's life changed with two different events, and they were, again, major changes. Now, Luther had been a lawyer, hadn't really thought about becoming a priest too much, but one day he was traveling on his job from one city to another, and in between he ran into a terrible storm. It was lightning and thunder flashing all over the place. There was rain, and the wind was blowing, trees were falling over, and he thought, I'm never going to make it through this. And so he got down, he did what a lot of us do. God, if you'll get me through this crisis, I'll become a priest. That's what he said. A lot of times we say, get me through this and I'll be a better person. Well, he changed his life because he did become then a monk. Okay? And by the way, Augustinian, kind of nice too. That was one change in his life. He still wasn't satisfied. Okay, I'm a priest, I'm not doing things right, am I self-righteous enough, whatever. He finally, believe it or not, also opened the Bible to the book of Romans. And he read a chapter, and he said, I realize now I am saved only by the grace of God. Whatever I do, I can't do good enough. I can't do enough of it. Okay, I have to remember that grace is there. So these two life-changing things as far as he was concerned, one like Augustine, one different. Okay. Now, not everybody is as influential as the people I mentioned or well-known and so on, but everybody at some point seems to have a good idea that they've been hearing signals, having the signs show them what they should be doing that make a change in their life. So what we want you to do for just a second is sit back, close your eyes, because God touched all these people, and I want you to think for just a little bit and listen to, He touched me. How do I live my life? How am I supposed to find out? Okay. Signs, again, tell us to some extent what we should do and how we should live our life. But let's go back to a little bit here in terms of what signs are there. For example, you all know about Halley's Comet. I called it Halley. That's when I grew up. Halley's Comet by some, but the guy spelled his name about 5 different ways, so nobody knows for sure. Halley's Comet comes around about every 75 years, right? Okay. Actually, in the Middle Ages, everyone thought when they saw that comet that God was going to kill everybody on Earth and the second coming and all that was going to take place. Okay. That tells you a little bit how you should live, should you not? Maybe you better change your life and be better, or the Halley's Comet's going to get you. But actually, in 1835, it came around again. And in that year, there was a baby born in 1835, Halley's Comet. And some people said, oh, that's a sign. He's going to have a great life, be a great person, or what have you. Okay. Well, in 1909, almost 75 years later, the fellow who was born during Halley Comet's first pass wrote in a memoir that basically said, I plan on dying next year with Halley's Comet, and if I don't, I'll be very disappointed. And that fellow was Mark Twain. He said, I came in with Halley's Comet, I'm going out with Halley's Comet, and guess what? He did. Okay, he died in 1910. Now, when 1910 came along, that's the way he responded. For other people, it was a little bit different. What they said was, an astronomer said, the tail of the comet is going to go right through the Earth. We're going to go through its tail. Oh my goodness, everybody was worried. We better live right and so on. By the way, it did change their lives because they started buying gas masks because the astronomer thought it might pollute the atmosphere and kill everybody. So they bought that. They also went out and they bought what they called comet umbrellas so that they could hold them over their head in case the comet, fell down on them, would bounce off or whatever, right? But Halley's Comet kind of gives those things too. So we've been touched. How do we react? Okay. How do we show that things are done? This involves a question called good works, at least to some extent. Okay. We have to live according to good works. Of course, what is a good work? I don't know. It kind of depends who you are and how it's going to be defined. If a young person, if Christine, for example, helped me across the street, and there are times I could sure use a help, is that a good work? She's helping me out. Yeah, that's kind of it's a nice thing to do, right? So we have to decide if that's a good work or not. Okay. One theologian who's talked about this question, for example, says, there are many works which are good enough between man and man, but we shall use the good works here only in the sense of its regard to God. What do we do in regards to God? He performs good works, okay? He who does perform good works to himself, that's not going to hack it, okay? Basically what we're concerned with is motive. Why are you doing this? Okay? So the question here again goes back to good old Moses. Why are we doing what we're doing? Well, Moses said, here's one thing you should do. You've been touched, now this is the way you live. Here are the 10 commandments. Right? The 10 commandments are the law, and the law tells us about manners and how to live and all that. Okay? It's also called a moral law. By the way, the interesting thing about the 10 commandments is it seems to have been the first moral law. In other words, the Jews were told there are certain things that you should not do. Do not murder. Honor thy father and mother. The other religions at the time, it was kind of party, 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 bring your sacrifices, and whatever you've done, everything is good. This is a moral law, which we still live by to some extent today. Okay? So as we read in the scriptures of the 10 commandments, which is what Christina read earlier, that tells you how to live. Okay, that's the way we should do it. Okay? If you want to find salvation, you can do that, and that's the way that we're going to come across it. The New Testament provides a tremendous discussion of good works between two people in particular, Paul and James. And for many people, they're on different sides of the story, but they really aren't at this particular point. Paul, for example, writes in Ephesians chapter 2, 8 and 9, for by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Okay. So that's a good work. Now, when Kendall and Valerie and Christine go each month to pick up the meat at the fire station, that's a good work, is it not? But on the other hand, they bring it here, put it in the freezer, and then they ask you to take it to someone who needs it. That's all very good. Those are good works, right? On the other hand, Why are you doing it? Are you saying, I'm going to take this good meat over to somebody and share a portion with them, and they'll say, oh, what a nice person you are. Oh, you're wonderful. Thank you so much. And then we'll put your name in the newsletter and say, Harry Jones decided that they would give a portion of meat to somebody. And everybody says, isn't that wonderful? And you know what? James would say, you are wrong. What you do is say, I'm doing this not for me, but I'm doing it for God and to help the other person. Okay, so motive is important at this particular point. Okay, so James says faith is fine. As a matter of fact, he writes that, but we do put it down. But so how do we do that, and how are these good works shown? Well, let me read you Matthew 25, verses 34 through 40. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you by the foundation of the world. For I was hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and you came upon me. Then shall the righteous answer, saying, Lord, when saw we thee as hungered, and fed thee, or thirsty, and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger, and took thee in, or naked, or clothed thee? And what Jesus was saying is, if you do it to others in my name, then you're doing it to me. And that's the motive. That's what you should be doing at that point. Now, one other group I want to mention quickly because it's a major part, and they're still around in the world today. The Puritans, who settled Boston clear back in the 1640s, were a group of people that believed in predestination. All right? And as far as predestination is concerned, that meant at birth you were decided to be saved. You know, salvation was there. All right. So predestination was a problem for them because they said, we don't know for sure who is saved, even though somebody is predestined, right? The question is, how do you live your life and you don't know whether you've been saved or not? So the answer from the Puritan point of view was, you should live your life as if you're saved, because you might be. And that is for the glory of God, right? You live your life doing what he wants you to do. So their point was, there's going to be a lot of community pressure to live the right kind of life for the right reason. Okay. By the way, they disapproved highly of gossip. I'd had a hard time there myself, probably. But they disapproved of gossip. You know, they would put people in stocks for gossiping. But you know what? In the Ten Commandments, it says you should not spread false information about other people. Now, I don't spread false information. What I always say is true. But just the same, that's not what you're supposed to do. So today, what are good works? Again, helping other people, living the right life, following the Ten Commandments. By the way, it was felt at one point, if you followed all of the rules of the law that Moses gave, you could reach salvation. The only problem is, no one's perfect. No one could keep every law. So therefore, you could not possibly make it to salvation because no one is perfect. So therefore, it's through faith. And by the way, James says, faith without works is dead. Faith is great, but if you don't show it in your life, it isn't any good. All right. But he and Paul, by the way, maybe here and here, they really are here. They both believe in faith, and Paul writes also, you have faith, should have good works. So together they come. So when you go out today, and you leave this church, and you're going out into the world, I want you to remember that what you're doing is for the glory of God. And whatever you do reflects on the things that we believe in and what you believe in, right? So you're going to go out and light up the world a little bit more. You're going to light up the world, and you're going to let your little light shine. So sit back for just a minute and close your eyes and let your little light shine, at least within you here.